What's up, everyone? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, ES, NQ, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to talk about some big data that's coming out for tomorrow. It's going to affect the market, so what you should be watching for as time progresses. But let me just mention that I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. And the offer ends in just about 1 week from now. Anyways, for SPY, I just wanted to mention that as of right now, on a very, very big down day, we're actually seeing some very, very interesting looking shifts in technicals right now. And we're seeing some buyers trying to defend at 542 right now, approaching our 200 EMA. But the question now becomes, are we going to see a nice bounce from here? Or are we about to get a big rejection? As of right now, the trend is very bearish. We're continuing to fall, and there is a risk more downside, in my personal opinion. So I'm going to break down more information about this in just a minute. I first want to talk about some data. Tomorrow is going to be a very important day. It's going to be Thursday, July 25th, 2024. Please note that 1 hour before the market opens, we have important data coming out that's going to affect SPY, the QQQ, and all these other tickers. So get ready for all of that. The data that's coming out is going to be initial jobless claims, not to mention the GDP sales and GDP growth. This will be very, very important GDP numbers, especially for understanding the strength of this economy and how things are growing. We're expecting between 2 and 2.5%, so we'll have to see what kind of move this leads to. But as long as the numbers are kind of like decent, I do think the market could rebound just a little bit, just temporarily. And it doesn't necessarily mean the market's going to bounce and reverse its trend. The overall trend is still bearish, but there could be a little shift tomorrow depending on how the data looks. Now, for earnings, I just want to call out that yesterday, Tesla and Alphabet / Google did not have the best of earnings. Alphabet / Google saw a little bit of a dip on YouTube ad revenue, and that actually led to a little bit of a sell-off alongside other pieces of news about guidance and such. And then for Tesla, they ended up missing on EPS but beating on revenue, and the sell-off was very, very severe for Tesla. It was down like almost 12% for the day, and still selling off even during the after hours. Now today, during the morning, we had AT&T announce earnings. They did relatively well, and then after market close today, we just had IBM and Ford announce their earnings. IBM did relatively well as well, beating on EPS with $2.43 adjusted, and revenue is also a beat at $15.77 billion above expectations. That's a 1.9% increase compared to what we saw a year ago. Not bad whatsoever. They also had some decent guidance with cash flow now expected to increase. So that's something else that's worth noting, but not bad whatsoever from IBM. One last thing to talk about before I start talking about the charts is the fact that the fear and greed index has shifted. We're no longer neutral. We're no longer greedy. We are simply just at a very, very critical level. We're just at fear right now. So this is important because now fear is making up sentiments, and we're seeing a big shift because of that. The overall momentum is no longer greedy. The market's just barely at neutral, and we're getting very close to the 125 daily moving average. This is a big shift right now. We used to be very greedy. Things are shifting all over the place. Now we're just back to neutral. On top of this, the puts and call option positioning is going back up to neutral. This is showing us that from the last 5 days on average, okay, there's a lot of more put buying that's happening. There's a lot more shorts piling into the markets, and that's also contributing to why we're dipping the way we are. And then volatility for the VIX is now breaking to the upside again. The VIX has hit 18 plus, and now it's once again remaining more bullish. This is a bearish signal for the markets, so just be very, very careful. So the question is, what's going to happen from here? What is my personal opinion? Honestly, guys, we're not looking too good. We saw this very, very big sell-off on SPY and the QQQ. If you look at the daily time frame on SPY, we're continuing to fall, and we have very, very important supports to be watching for. So we're currently at 542 right now. We're seeing some buyers trying to defend it. We'll see if we gap up tomorrow, depending on what the data looks like. Now, personally, I am not a fortune teller. I don't know what the GDP numbers will look like, so I can't promise anything about that. But I can tell you this. There's a good chance the market may attempt to gap up tomorrow, depending on the numbers. And if we end up losing supports, just watch the levels I'm going to call out, and that's going to help you understand what's going to happen. So for the levels, remember, guys, that we have 542 as a very, very key zone. This is very close to our daily 50 EMA and the 4-hour 200 EMA as well. So 542 is one area where we're kind of seeing some buyers trying to like defend it. We're going kind of back and forth around here. We did close below it, but we are seeing buyers trying to get us back above it during the after hours. However, if we continue to fall, I'll be looking at 540 as the last point of support. We'll see if 540 holds. If we fail there, we have this big gap to fill all the way down to the 536s. So SPY is going to dip all the way down to the 536s if 540 breaks. So watch 542, 540, and then 536. If we end up losing 540, we're going to come all the way down to at least 536, if not lower. And if that does not hold us, there's going to be a much bigger sell. We have another gap down to 528 and beyond. But we're just going to focus on those supports. Make sure you watch those levels just to see how SPY holds up. I also want to mention that for resistance, look at the 4-hour time frame on SPY. Our resistance is going to be around 544. If we do break that, I could be looking for a move back up technically to about 548, but not a guarantee, guys. So that's what I'm just wanted to break down in terms of levels. So that being said, what's going to happen with the charts? What is my personal opinion? The answer is, guys, we are looking more bearish. And going into tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually continue to see maybe a gap up as the most likely possibility. We dropped really, really hard, so seeing some buyers trying to defend a little gap up is very possible. That also depends on the GDP numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if we actually try to push just a little bit. But then we'll have to be watching. Even if we do gap up, will we collapse again? Will we end up rejecting again and continue to drop? We need to lose 542 as one confirmation of weakness. And if 540 breaks, we're going to be looking for a big drop, guys. So just be careful. Those are going to be your levels to watch for. I predict we're going to likely gap up tomorrow. I think that's the most likely possibility. But we might not be able to sustain the levels. So we might continue to see the sell-off if we fail and we end up losing 542 and then 540. That looks more favorable to me looking at the chart, as we're looking very bearish. From an Elliott wave perspective, you could even argue that this is like wave one right here, which is pretty violent. And now we're entering like wave two, which could lead to an even bigger sell-off. I wouldn't solely trade based off this, but I just want to say we still look very bearish. Now for ES, okay, I want to call out ES very quickly because I do have a concern. We have this gap to fill on ES, and we haven't filled the full gap yet, which makes me suspect that even if we do gap up tomorrow, there might be more downside coming to fill this gap, and that could actually drag SPY down even lower. So we might gap up tomorrow and then continue to fall. Be very, very careful, especially when the market opens. ES might actually kind of like rebound just a bit, then continue lower. Maybe not gap, but I'm just trying to say that for SPY, it's going to lead to that. And another concern I have is that SPX still has this gap to fill down here around 53.78. So this is also favoring downside big time, guys. So this is also favoring downside. This could be bearish for SPY as well. So signals still favor downside in my opinion. For Nvidia, I do see a concern. We're actually losing our 200 EMA. We lost 118, then 115. Check this out, guys. We have another big gap down here. Right here, there's a gap. It's a little hard to see. Let me just make it look a little bigger. Way back here, we have a gap from before June, I think back in May, a gap all the way down to 110. So we might be dipping all the way down there if we end up losing supports at 114 on Nvidia. So we're looking pretty weak. The 114 area kind of is a confluence with this area right here, the previous imbalance. And because we're on a downtrend, by downtrend, I mean look at the trend. We had this high right here at 137, made a lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. We're continuing to fall. So if we do gap up tomorrow, watch 115 and 118 as resistance levels. My gut tells me we might touch those. One of those levels, 115, if not 118. 118 may be a stretch, may come kind of short of that. Then continue to fall to 110. There is a risk of that looking at the fact that we have a big gap to fill right here. So be very, very careful, guys. That is the most likely possibility. But if we end up closing above 117, then we could try to rebound. Just keep that level in the back of your mind. It depends on the GDP numbers, but the chart still looks more bearish to me. Bitcoin's kind of rejecting. We're going to be looking at 65,500 as key support. If this breaks, this imbalance will take us all the way down towards 64,000. There is a risk of Bitcoin dipping. If we rebound, look at 66,300 as resistance. My guts tells me this might be dipping all the way down to about 64K. So be careful, guys. Bitcoin's looking a little bit more bearish right here. For Tesla, I know this is on a lot of people's minds. It's looking bearish. Okay, people were saying it was going to bounce. I said, nope, there's no sign of the bounce yet. Lo and behold, we're still selling off. We're down 12% for the day. We're going to be testing 212 tomorrow, so there's going to be a little bit more selling coming. And we have to see if Tesla holds this or not. If we hold 212, then yes, Tesla could try to get back up to 220. If we lose 212, we're going to be dipping all the way down to this imbalance towards like 205, 206 or so, and then 200. So it looks more bearish to me. It does favor downside, but look for a test of 212 and see if we get a bounce or not. So it's going to drop a few more points, but watch and see what kind of reaction we get depending on how things look. So you want to be very, very careful, guys. That's going to be key for the way Tesla ends up moving. For the NQ, for futures out there, this is looking quite bearish, especially because we have a lot of these gaps. I'm going to pull up the daily chart on NQ just to show you guys something very important. On NQ, we've dipped quite a bit. We're looking very bearish on the daily time frame. We have support right here around 19,200, also 19,000 flat. If we lose that, I'll be looking for a dip all the way down towards 18,900. That's where we have previous resistance becoming support. So just under 19,000 might be tested. It looks more bearish to me. Maybe it pushes a little higher, then continues lower, but so far the chart has no sign of a bounce. For the QQQ, it's the same thing. We're looking very bearish on the daily time frame. We're actually continuing to fall. In the after hours, we're barely at 464, which is going to be one of our resistance levels, just under 465. So if we're bullish, you want to break past 465 and then eventually 468. If we break that, we could be making our way back up to 472. If we're bearish, you want to lose 464. If that breaks, we're going to come all the way down. In my opinion, if 463 breaks, excuse me, guys. If we lose that support from there, I think we're going to be coming all the way down to 460. Then 458 is coming next. In my opinion, the QQQ is down really hard. It should gap up tomorrow, but with all this bearish momentum, it could continue to sink. So there is a risk of more downside, in my personal opinion. So just be very, very careful. So it might, gap up towards 465 or so, then reject and start tipping down to 458. Aapl not looking too good. Looks more bearish to me. We have this previous resistance becoming support around 217. If that fails, I see us dipping all the way down to about 215. If that fails, our next level is going to be down here towards 212. Overall, we have resistance to be watching for around 218 and then 220, but this chart's favoring downside. It's making lower highs and lower lows. Maybe it kind of gaps up, then continues lower, but the odds favor 215 or 212. For Palantir, Palantir has a head and shoulders like structure, looking very, very bearish right now. I think that whether we gap up or not doesn't matter. I think we're going to be coming all the way down to about 25.85. That is the most likely possibility, in my opinion, looking at this structure and how weak the 4-hour is looking. For Supermicro, we're looking a little bit more bearish as well. We have a very, very big looking sell off right here. We're also struggling to hold 700. So we'll see if buyers defend 700. It is possible we try to retest 700 to 720, then reject. But I think that we should be coming all the way down to about 680. I think there's a risk of that. So watch and see how we react to 700, if we get a little bounce or not in the morning, and then we continue to drop to about 680. That's the most likely possibility. Because of the way Tesla was moving, right? Rivian also sold off with Tesla. That's why it's down 7%, alongside other factors. But just notes that right now, there's an imbalance over here in previous support, which is our previous resistance becoming support at 16 flat. So I expect 16 flat, if not lower. So it still looks more bearish to me. For so far, we're continuing to fall. I think there's a risk of about $7 from here. Looks very, very bearish. I think 7 is coming. If that fails, this gap will fill all the way down to about 6.8. Still looks more bearish. To be bullish, you want to break past 7.4. That's looking less likely. I do favor a gap fill all the way down. With the IWM, we have a nice double top like structure. I favor we might be dipping all the way down to about basically this 217.5 area. If that breaks, we'll be looking for 215.75 as our next target. That's going to be very, very key for the IWM or Russell 2000. It's also starting to sell off a bit, so I think we're going to be testing 215.75, almost 216. If that breaks, then there's a big gap to fill at 213. So you want to be very, very careful with this. The problem is we have a double top leg structure, so it's favoring the downside. We could dip a little bit lower, then eventually come down to fill that gap. That's looking a lot more favorable to me. For AMD, this is looking more bearish. I said yesterday, if we lose 150, look for a big drop. If we held that, we could have rebounded. But now I see a risk of a big rejection. We could retouch, just under 147. It is possible, but then I see a continuation lower towards 142. So maybe we rebound. I mean, we have an imbalance over here. Could rebound a bit, but then if we don't hold 145, look for 142, then 140. Still looks more bearish to me. ARM is looking more bearish. If you look at the 4-hour PPO, it's favoring the downside. I could be looking for a move towards this imbalance towards 154. That's looking more favorable to me, and I think that we might be testing that, if not 152.5. Why? That's going to be our 200 EMA test, and we have a bearish structure, so we're favoring the downside. For Coinbase, we have 243 as key support. If that breaks, this imbalance will fill all the way down towards 236. If we bounce off this, I'll be looking for 252. So far, we are favoring the downside. If 243 fails, we'll be continuing to fall. There's also this big gap to fill all the way down to 219. So watch and see if this continues lower. I think there's a risk of this happening for 236. I think that if 243 fails, we're going to continue to fall. And I think that there's a big risk right over here. For Amazon's also continuing to downtrend right over here. I just want to make it very clear that we have a head and shoulders like structure. There's a left shoulder here, a head and then a right shoulder. And 180 is going to be tested most likely. So maybe we rebound a bit, retest, 182 or so. This is actually the previous support right here. So I think 182.5 could be retested. And then if it fails, watch for a test of 180. I think we're going to retest 180. And then watch and see if that breaks. If that breaks, we could be falling all the way down to 174. There's a head and shoulders. The trend is more bearish. Amazon has a risk of downside, so be careful. If 180 breaks, that's your confirmation of more downside. For Meta, we rebounded only to reject, and now we're continuing to fall. So I wouldn't be surprised if we retest just under 465, then we reject and start tipping all the way down here towards 454. That looks more favorable to me, so I favor the downside as well. For Microsoft, this looks a little bit more bearish. It's continuing to fall. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up dipping all the way down here towards 425. That looks more favorable as well to me. So maybe we retest 432, then reject and start dipping for 425. Watch for that very carefully. For Google, we rebounded a bit only to reject and we're continuing to fall. We could retest 176 and then continue to fall down here towards this imbalance. 172.5 is likely going to be our target. We're still looking bearish. It really struggled after earnings. So unfortunately, it's continuing to fall and it looks more bearish to me. So I think it might be a little rebound and a continuation lower, but we still remain bearish. For GameStop, I know a lot of people are interested in this one. We're looking bearish. Okay, we're straight up just bearish. We're losing support under 200 EMA. So I think the full measure move takes us down to about 23 flat. So I think that's coming for GameStop. For AMC, we're also rejecting right over here, failing to hold above our 200 EMA. Also, this imbalance down to about 4.4 will be tested most likely. So it looks to me like we're going to be dipping even more for AMC. Lo and behold, exactly as you predicted, DJT would fill the gap down to at least 31. We're currently at 30, so we'll have to see if we try to see buyers defend 30 or not. If they defend, we're going back up to 31.5. If they fail, if they don't defend us and we continue to fall, I'll be looking at this, basically the support at 29. I favor a move back down towards 29, so I favor downside in my personal opinion. For the VIX, we're trying to break out right here to the upside. We have a nice little push that's coming, but I just want to make it very clear that there's no sign of the VIX rejecting just yet. We're fighting 18 as resistance. And it's possible we kind of dip a bit to retest 17.1 to about 17, and then we continue higher. It's on an uptrend right now. So we'll see if the VIX dips a little bit, if the market does rebound a bit in the morning. But then there's no sign of the VIX changing its trend unless we end up losing our 20 EMA. If we lose 15.6, then yes, the VIX could shift, but it's on an uptrend. So that means that the market's on a big downtrend. So even if the VIX comes down a bit and the market tries to rebound just a little bit tomorrow morning, the VIX could still bounce and continue higher into the 20s, and that could lead to more downside. The market's not done yet, so you want to be very, very careful. For the 10-year Treasury yield, it's starting to uptrend a little bit. If it continues to uptrend, you're going to be looking for a test of 4.33. That's a bearish signal for the markets. The dollar is surprisingly kind of flat right now, but my concern is the fact that we have an inverse head and shoulders. If the dollar starts running again, if it starts pushing thanks to the inverse head and shoulders, and we start testing 104.8, that would be a bearish signal for the markets. That was what concerned me yesterday, and it hasn't played out yet, but there is a risk of this trying to bounce because of the inverse head and shoulders. So this could lead to more selling in the markets. So I wanted to just call that out. With that being said, the market's in a critical place. There are some buyers trying to defend 542. They're trying to defend it, but we'll have to see if this holds. The odds favor us kind of gapping up tomorrow, maybe pushing a little bit, so we could get closer to 544, but there's no guarantee it's going to last. Just like how we pushed a little bit from 548 all the way back up to about 556 only to reject. There might be a temporary push up before we continue lower, but the trend is still bearish. So on SPY, make sure you watch 542. If that doesn't hold, I'll be looking at 540. And if that breaks, prepare yourselves for a bigger drop, guys. The market's going to get a bigger rug pull. All right. I know it's not what anyone wants to hear, but I'm just being 100% blunt and honest. If you were watching my videos yesterday, this would not be a surprise. I called a downside. I said there's going to likely be downside after Tesla and Google's earnings. So this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. We called this move since yesterday, and that's what's been happening thus far. With that being said, I'm telling everyone that there is a risk of more downside if we lose some key supports. So watch for that very carefully and be very, very open-minded. I want the best for everyone. So take care, guys. Enjoy your night, evening, or day wherever you are around the world. And I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow on the next one. Thank you for listening, and peace out.